They mocked Earth like it was a backwater mistake of creation. A blue planet tucked in a forgotten solar system, orbiting an average star, home to a species with too many emotions and too little logic, according to the rest of the galaxy. They watched our wars and laughed. They saw our poverty, our rage, our endless struggle against ourselves, and they judged us weak. The Galactic High Order cataloged Earth as a developing Class II primitive world, not a threat, not a priority. A footnote in the grand sprawl of the Orion Archive. That was their first mistake. Commander Ridgehalden never forgot the sneers on the Council's faces. He'd stood in front of them 20 years ago as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Union. He wasn't polished. He wasn't born to a high caste. He was ex-military, scarred in both body and soul from the last resource wars on Earth. But he carried Earth's desperation and defiance in his blood like a battle flag. They treated him like a joke, like he'd dragged mud into a palace. Even the translators couldn't hide the laughter. "You humans still kill each other for water and mating rights," one of the delegates from Thalor had said, voice dripping with condescension. "What could you possibly offer the galaxy?" Ridge had clenched his fist under the table that day. He didn't answer then, but he made a silent promise. "One day you'll see. You'll all see what Earth does when it's cornered. The galaxy didn't hear from Earth again for 2 decades. The High Order chalked it up to failure. Some thought Earth had gone extinct. A few curious species sent probes, but none returned. Another mistake. Because Earth hadn't gone quiet. It had gone dark, the kind of dark that only comes before a storm. Back home, Ridge had returned to a planet barely hanging on. Governments had collapsed into corporate states. Oceans were choked, skies blood orange with dust and fire. But in the silence, in the ruin, Earth had done something the High Order never predicted. It unified. Under a single banner, Terran Accord, they stopped fighting each other and started preparing for something else entirely. Not peace, not diplomacy, retribution. When alien tech was reverse-engineered, everything changed. Faster than light drives, artificial gravity, energy weapons. Earth hadn't caught up. It leapfrogged. Factories once used for building tanks turned to shipyards. I run, sleepless, soulless. Entire prison populations vanished overnight. Volunteers for experiments in extreme spaceflight adaptation. Ethics were luxuries Earth could no longer afford. The Terran Navy was built in silence and trained in shadows, fueled by a single idea. Never again would Earth beg for a seat at someone else's table. Ridge didn't smile much, but the day the first Terran dreadnought, the Dark Horizon, came online, he let one slip. "Let them laugh now," he muttered. Years passed. Reports of Terran vessels entering restricted space began to spread. Ghosts that moved too fast to trace, ships shaped like spears and blades rather than the floating domes of peaceful races. Stations went dark. Colonies stopped responding. The High Order finally sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth. It never returned. Then came the day the galaxy would never forget. The sky over the Galactic High Capital turned black. Not with night, but with steel. Thousands of Terran warships, cloaked until the final moment, dropped out of fold space without warning. A silent, synchronized rain of vengeance. No declaration of war, no ultimatum, just a broadcast. Ridge's voice, cold and deliberate, piped into every frequency across the known galaxy. "You laughed. You dismissed us. Now we're here to show you what humanity is, when we have nothing left to lose." Then the bombardment began. The first salvo from the Dark Horizon split the sky. It was poetic, in a brutal kind of way. The Galactic High Capital, a pristine utopia of floating crystal towers and silver walkways suspended in anti-gravity fields, had never known war. It had never even prepared for it. Their navy, if you could call it that, was ceremonial. Peacekeeping patrols, inspection teams, a few warships left over from centuries-old interstellar feuds, most of them docked and forgotten in orbital museums. Then came the Terran Accord's main fleet, 50 dreadnoughts, 200 cruisers, thousands of assault carriers and black-body destroyers, a stormfront of iron and fury, no bright lights, no heroic music, just silence and then destruction. Surgical, exact, merciless. The Dark Horizon didn't target weapons. It targeted foundations. Orbital defense rings evaporated under kinetic mass drivers, untraceable rods of depleted uranium launched at relativistic speeds, each one hitting like a miniature asteroid. Artificial gravity collapsed across the capital's higher tiers. Floating towers plunged. Civilian transports ignited mid-air, debris raining down on plazas filled with diplomats and civilians too slow to react. The ground cracked. The air screamed. But the worst part wasn't the death. It was the confusion. The High Order didn't understand what was happening. Not at first. They couldn't fathom it. For centuries, the galaxy had operated under a kind of fragile logic. Advanced civilizations were patient, rational. They followed protocols. They respected hierarchy. Terrans didn't. They weren't there to negotiate. They weren't there to be seen. They were there to end it. "Cut the central comms," Ridgehalden ordered. He sat in the command chair of the Dark Horizon like a man already at peace with what he was doing. No more transmissions, no explanations, no warnings. "Aye, Commander." The tactical screen lit up with fleet positions. Terran forces were moving through the capital's airspace like fire through dry grass. Dozens of strike pods had launched from low orbit, coated in stealth polymer, invisible to radar, and packed with Earth's finest drop marines. No uniforms, no flashy armor. Just matte black exosuits, high-gravity muscles enhanced through blood serums and pain. The High Council's towers were burning. Ridge watched the feed without emotion. They had laughed at Earth, called it savage, primitive, an infection. They were right. But they forgot one thing. Infections adapt. Sergeant Roden Hail hit the ground hard. He didn't wait to check his gear. No time. His squad landed behind him, boots crunching into the polished stone of the central spire courtyard. Above them, the council building, a towering spire of glass and magnetized alloy, tipped like a falling tree, flames licking its upper decks. They moved in silence, not out of discipline, out of hatred. Each of them had a reason. Families starved during the Earth Purge, cities wiped out by alien peacekeepers who intervened in civil unrest with orbital weapons. Children dissected in unauthorized Thigh lore experiments. History that was never recorded. Apologies never made. Hail kicked in the front entrance. No alarms, just panic. Alien guards tried to form a line. They were elegant, thin-limbed species with plasma staffs and ceremonial armor. Beautiful to look at. Useless in real war. Hail raised his repeater rifle. He didn't fire once. He fired until the clip melted. Blood splattered the walls. Not red, blue, green, gold. Alien blood ran like paint down the marble floors. "Push forward," he barked. His men moved without a word. Guns low, eyes forward, no mercy. They weren't soldiers. They were the consequence of centuries of dismissal. They moved up the tower, floor by floor, slaughtering everything in their way. Aides, technocrats, generals in silk robes who raised their hands for mercy and got bullets instead. The hallway echoed with screams, not from pain, from realization. The galaxy was witnessing a truth it had refused to see. Humanity was not broken. It was focused. In orbit, the Terran fleet fanned out, not to occupy, Not to capture, to dismantle. Entire databanks of galactic archives were hijacked, copied, then erased. Terraforming control systems were overloaded. Starport reactors were set to melt down on a slow countdown. Enough time for the fleet to pull back, but not enough for the capital to survive. "This is war crime territory, Ridge," said his second-in-command, Captain Bren Talek. This ain't liberation." Ridge didn't even look at him. "It's justice." Talek didn't argue again. On Earth, Ridge's daughter had died in a refugee camp because alien biotech wasn't authorized for human genetics. Ridge's wife had been denied medical transport off-world because the Thaylor courts didn't recognize Terran sovereignty. He'd pleaded, filed petitions, gone through every legal channel the High Order had offered. It had bought him 2 funerals. The galaxy had wrapped cruelty in diplomacy. So Ridge returned cruelty in steel. Counselor Draven Minth crawled through the rubble of his once pristine chamber. He was bleeding. Several of his arms were broken. He couldn't tell how many. The room stank of smoke and carbonized flesh. Screams echoed from lower levels. He'd never seen real violence. He didn't know how to process it. A human soldier stepped through the shattered doors. Broad, scarred, his armor hummed with energy. His eyes weren't angry. They were done. "Please," Draven wheezed. We didn't know. If we had understood." The soldier raised a small device. A projector. A voice filled the room. Ridge's voice, pre-recorded. "This is not about you personally. This is not about species or culture. This is about what happens when you mock pain, when you mistake restraint for weakness." The message ended. The soldier didn't shoot. He turned and walked away. Seconds later, the charges planted on the support pillars detonated. The council chamber collapsed. Hours passed. The bombardment slowed. Not because the Terrans were done, because they were efficient. Entire governmental structures had been erased. The High Order's command relay, its economic AI network, its warp gate links, all gone. The galactic high capital was now a smoldering tomb, orbiting a planet that no longer controlled the galaxy. The Terran fleet stayed in low orbit, silent, watching. Messages began to flood in from other systems. Some were threats, others were pleas. Most were silent acknowledgments. Humanity had arrived, and it had come with memory. "Are we staying?" Talek asked, eyes on the tactical feed. Ridge sat back. The dark horizon hummed around him. "No." "Why not?" "We've won. We could take the whole quadrant." Ridge turned his head slowly. "We didn't come to take. We came to show." Talek nodded. He understood now. The message wasn't in conquest. It was in restraint after the wrath. Across the galaxy, news spread. The humans had returned, not as savages, as a force of balance. "You mock Earth again, and next time the sky won't go dark. It will go red." The capital burned for 3 weeks. Even as Terran dreadnoughts vanished into fold space, the ash never settled. Smoke curled through the clouds above the ruins, a choking reminder that the galaxy had changed and couldn't rewind. The High Order's elite fled into bunkers or off-world havens, those lucky enough to survive the first wave. But survival came with a price no one could erase: humiliation. The invincible were now exposed, and it wasn't aliens or beasts that did it. It was humans, the very species they'd mocked like a malformed pet for centuries. Now every planet, every moon, every council outpost whispered one question: what does Earth want next? It wasn't just fear, it was something worse: uncertainty. Planet Rasava, 2 light-years from the high capital, had once been a cultural jewel of the inner rings. It was untouched by war, its cities grown from bioharmonic trees, its skies clean and resonant with weather-controlled melodies. Now it was a vault a fortress masked as art. Inside the grand chamber of revision, Counselor Thalen Seros sat surrounded by 6 other species, each a remnant of shattered confidence. "What if they strike again?" hissed Orvak Terran, a crusted carapaced elder from the Hernak Syndicate. "We've seen no treaties, no demands, just death, silent, clinical. Who's next?" "They left," Seros said, his voice cold. "They came to teach a lesson. They taught it. They left." Orvak slammed a claw down. "No species makes war like that unless they plan more." "That's just it," said Lyori of the Ven. Her pale skin glistened under the humid glow of the chamber lights. "They didn't make war. Not by our terms. They didn't take slaves. They didn't mine. Didn't claim territory. They erased systems, then walked away." "And that," Seros said, "terrifies me more." There was silence for a moment. "They're not conquerors. They're correctors." The word hung there, thick as gravity. If they had come to conquer, the Council could rally, build walls, negotiate, bribe. But this was different. Earth had moved through the capital like a virus burning out infection. Then it vanished. It wasn't control Earth wanted, it was respect, and they'd take it in blood if denied. Elsewhere, in the ice rings of Kveler, a mercenary warlord watched the capital's collapse through intercepted drone footage. General Korvek, a hybrid brute of Kor lineage, had been carving out war zones along the galactic edge for 2 decades. He prided himself on fearing nothing. But as he watched Terran infantry breach the Council Tower with 0 losses, he felt something crawl up his spine. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like men who had already lost everything, and liked it that way. He remembered the stories. Back when Earth was still scorned, a few rogue merchants had whispered of black projects and brutal conditioning camps in Earth's underbelly. Warfare born not from tradition, but from starvation. From loss. Terrans didn't train to win. They trained because dying was boring. Korvek powered down the feed. "No one fights Earth again," he muttered. And across a dozen systems, warlords like him issued new orders. Do not engage humans. Ever. On Earth, things were different. Quiet. Ridge Halden sat in a steel bunker somewhere beneath the old Colorado mountain lines. The war was over. But no celebration came. No banners, no medals, no media. Earth had changed. So had Ridge. The world above had unified under the Terran Accord not because of trust, but because of necessity. The Purge had forced old enemies to share oxygen. Nations dissolved. Cultures blurred. Race, creed, flag. None of it mattered anymore. You were either Terran or you were dead. But now, with the capital dusted and Earth's vengeance complete, the real challenge came. What the hell happens now? Ridge wasn't a politician. He didn't trust diplomats. He didn't need peace. But he did need purpose. So he created one. "Operation Wraith," he said, pacing before a group of commanders in a concrete war room deep beneath Terran soil. "Galactic systems are still in chaos. The High Order is shattered. Their archives are corrupted. Their economic net is down. They'll be scrambling for years." He turned to the wall, where a hollow map of the galaxy slowly rotated, dozens of blinking red dots scattered across its arms. "These are the systems that benefited from our suffering. Corporations, biolabs, slave traders, weapons suppliers. They think we're gone. Done." He turned around. "We're not. We're going to finish what we started. Not with fleets, not with nukes. With whispers, sabotage, extraction, blackouts. We're sending agents, not armies." A pause. "We're going to make ghosts of them." And so began Earth's second strike, not with brute force, but with silence. Over the next 5 years, one by one, the red dots blinked out. Orbital facilities went offline without cause. Trade routes collapsed under accidents. Key officials in alien syndicates died mysteriously. No wounds, no signs of struggle. Entire planetary defense networks turned off seconds before asteroid strikes. And every time someone asked, was it the Terrans? No one had an answer, because the Terrans had become a myth. In the ruins of the old capital, a monument stood. No official decree had built it. No government had sanctioned it. It was constructed overnight, silent, untouched by surveillance. A jagged piece of the collapsed council tower stood upright, scorched black. Around its base, no flags, no names, just 3 words etched in 26 galactic languages. Never mock Earth. Pilgrims came, not to mourn, to remember. It became sacred, not in religion but in fear. Children born after the fall would ask, who were the Terrans? And their parents would whisper, the ones who made gods bleed. The galaxy slept with one eye open now. There were no more grand declarations from the Terran Accord, no speeches, no military parades. Earth faded from the galactic conversation, not because it was weak, but because it had become something worse than feared. Unpredictable. Governments rebuilt their towers and bureaucracies. Fleets were reassembled. Trade lanes restored. The High Order was reborn under a new name, the Celestial Alignment. Same faces, same arrogance, different branding. But everyone remembered the silence that came after Earth's wrath. They remembered the way Earth didn't occupy, didn't colonize, didn't demand. It simply acted, and then disappeared. Until one day the lights went out on Karus 7. No warning, no battles, just gone. The planet's trade stations, communications grid, and planetary AI obliterated. A planet of 2 billion lives fell into chaos. When recovery teams arrived 3 weeks later, all they found was a phrase burned into the mainframe of the collapsed administrative complex. This is for Kepler Base. 2172. No one remembered what Kepler Base was, but Earth did. Ridge Halden watched the report through a haze of whiskey and silence. He sat alone in an observation bunker 100 meters beneath the Himalayas. He didn't wear medals, didn't smile. His face was colder now, rougher, each line etched by grief more than time. Kepler Base had been a minor outpost on Europa, Earth's farthest reach before the collapse. In 2172, a Thaylor delegation accidentally destroyed it with a gravity bomb meant for asteroid redirection. No apology ever came. He'd been a lieutenant then. His younger brother Carson had been stationed there. Ridge remembered his laugh, his goddamn stubbornness. They buried an empty coffin back then. He watched the silence of Karus 7 now and felt nothing but quiet. This is Wraith's legacy, he muttered. Around the galaxy, similar events began to unfold. A black site gene lab in the Paraxis belt mysteriously imploded during a routine test. A syndicate crime lord, once a known buyer of Terran refugees, died in his sleep. Every one of his security systems bypassed. No trace of poison, no sign of struggle. Just a Terran insignia on his forehead, burned into the skin. The message was clear. Earth hadn't forgotten anything. Wraith wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a battalion. It was a whisper program. Hundreds of hyper-trained operatives, each enhanced with bio-cybernetic upgrades Earth had stolen from its enemies and twisted into something uglier. These weren't soldiers. They weren't even human in the classical sense. They were Avengers, operating under one rule: no glory, no trace, no compromise. Their identities were erased, their existence denied, each one given a list, a mission, and no support. If captured, they were programmed to self-neutralize, not to avoid interrogation, but to deny their enemies closure. And at the top of every list were names the galaxy had long tried to bury. Those who profited from Earth's suffering. Those who had smirked while Terrans starved. Those who thought time would erase blood. Colonel Dax Foran had once served under Ridge Halden during the Silent Years. Now he led Wraith's deepest unit. Codename Fang. He had no home anymore. His bones were filled with synthetic iron, his reflexes sharper than a predator's. The last human thing about him was a wedding ring he still wore, fused into the muscle of his palm. His wife had died in the Earth Purge, smothered in rubble when a Thalor peace drone misfired during a planetary intervention in the old state of Brazil. He'd held her hand for 6 hours before she went cold. No rescue had ever come. Now he was about to repay that debt. On the mining world of Zephyrian, a Vornex overseer named Chalt Ka ran a labor camp that operated with zero oversight. Earth's exiles, Terran refugees who had escaped before the war, were among the slaves who mined cobalt under scorching suns. The Vornex Empire had never been targeted directly by Earth during the first assault. They weren't part of the High Order, just adjacent. They'd claimed neutrality, but neutrality meant silence. And silence, Earth had decided, was just another way of saying complicit. Fang inserted into the Zephyrian outlands through deep space covert drop. No lights, no beacons, just a hull that scraped the sky like a falling blade. Within 32 hours, Ka's palace, built on the bones of slave tunnels, was gone. Leveled. His security dead. His blood turned into black smoke. But the slaves? They weren't just freed. They were armed. The next day the camp became a fortress, newly declared sovereign. Flag Terran black. "Do you see what you've started?" Talek asked Ridge on a secure channel. "These aren't just missions anymore. They're revolutions." "They're consequences," Ridge replied, his voice gruff. "We tried diplomacy. We tried playing nice. We begged for a seat at the table." He leaned closer. "Now we're building our own table, and they'll crawl to sit at it." Across the stars, patterns emerged. Black market trade crashed. Genetic slavery declined. Illegal Terran bounty rings vanished, all because of Wraith. They didn't just kill the guilty. They unraveled their networks. One data leak at a time, one virus at a time, one knife at a time, and behind every Wraith op, the same calling card. A memory. Nothing was random. Nothing was collateral. Each strike avenged a date, a person, a pain. By the time the Celestial Alignment tried to retaliate, it was too late. They didn't know where Earth was anymore. The Terran Accord had moved its command to the dark side of Saturn's outer orbit, cloaked behind energy barriers and fractal distortion fields. No transmissions, no signals, just void. The next time someone tried to triangulate the Terran source command, their satellites melted mid-transmission. Ridge stood alone one night in the deepest chamber of Terran command. Around him, blackened steel. Maps, names, a list of atrocities Earth hadn't yet repaid. He wasn't smiling. He never did anymore. But there was peace in him now. Not the peace of victory. The peace of balance. Because for the first time in centuries, Earth wasn't fighting to survive. It was watching. And the galaxy knew it. The first shrine appeared on the moon of Televax, hidden beneath the remains of a collapsed mining station. It wasn't built by humans. It was sculpted by the survivors of a Vornex slave revolt. They carved it from Terran scrap metal and bone, twisted into the shape of a faceless armored figure standing tall over a field of dead gods. At its base were no names, just the same phrase burned into every surface: "The sky remembered." Galactic officials dismissed it at first. Just another cult, they said. Another outpost of trauma survivors trying to make sense of terror. But then more shrines appeared. On Delta Prime, The crater of an old battle site bore a stone pillar where Terran boots had once touched ground. Each day, thousands of native citizens laid tokens before it. Weapons, broken chains, blood-soaked fabrics. They didn't pray, they left thanks. For many, the Terrans weren't monsters anymore. They were necessary. The celestial alignment didn't know how to handle it. You couldn't wage war against ghosts, couldn't hold hearings for phantoms, couldn't censor a myth when it was etched in the silence of annihilated systems. The problem wasn't Earth's military strength anymore. It was its moral clarity, the brutal simplicity of its justice. Every target Earth struck had a legacy of atrocity. Documents, survivors, evidence. And so even as the alignment tried to condemn Terran actions, their own populations hesitated. You want to label Earth evil? Fine. But what about the labs they destroyed? What about the slave pits they burned? What about the corrupt syndicates they erased with surgical perfection? Nobody cried for the dead, not even their own kind. Wraith expanded. It was no longer just Earthborn operatives. Volunteers began defecting from other races. Species who'd once looked down on humans now asked to join their ranks. It started with mercenaries. Then it spread to scholars. Even ex-diplomats who had once voted against Earth during the High Order hearings began leaking data, eager to clear their conscience through usefulness. Earth accepted them all, after wiping their minds clean and reconstructing their memories under strict neural filters. You didn't join Wraith. You ceased to exist and became part of it. One of the earliest converts was an ex-political advisor named Vark-Un. A Thaylor, no less. He'd once called Ridge Halden a primitive with war fetish obsessions during the pre-war assembly. Now he wore the shadow insignia of Wraith and reported directly to Earth's Psychological Operations Division. His defection was voluntary, his memory wipe surgical. But some fragments bled through. He remembered his brother's cries, burned alive when Earth's orbital strikes caught a fleet he was commanding. He remembered the stench of fear when Terran soldiers cleared the refugee corridors with no expressions on their faces. And deep inside him, he remembered a singular moment of clarity. They were right. Everything Earth had said, everything it warned the galaxy about, the injustice, the blind pride, the systemic decay hiding behind diplomacy. He'd mocked it. And then he'd watched his world fall. He didn't hate the Terrans anymore. He wanted to be one. Meanwhile, the alignment tried to reassert itself. New fleets were commissioned. Propaganda machines worked overtime. Entire education systems were restructured to teach children that Earth was a virus of vengeance. But the fear had already taken root. Commanders second-guessed every deployment. Planets began declaring neutral territories marked with the Terran sigil, a white skull over a shattered star. These weren't declarations of alliance. They were begs for mercy. And Earth allowed it. For now. Ridge watched the reports with grim satisfaction. "You see this?" he told Talek one evening, showing him a spread of newly marked neutral zones across the Orion arm. "We never signed a treaty, never wrote a charter, never asked for diplomacy, and still..." He turned. "They're building a wall around us." Talek stared, unreadable. "And the rest of the galaxy? They're the ones behind it." Back on Earth, something else began to shift. The younger generation, those born after the war, grew up in silence. But it wasn't a silence of shame. It was reverence. Their parents didn't talk about the early days. They didn't need to. The stories were written in the sky. Memorials stood where orbital strikes had once landed. Murals showed Ridge Halden not as a man, but a silhouette. Face hidden, eyes glowing, always standing over ruins with a rifle held low and steady. In classrooms, children didn't chant patriotism. They studied targets. They didn't learn peace treaties. They studied justice cases, each one a record of some galactic abuse Earth had repaid in kind. Terran youth weren't raised to be citizens, they were raised to be witnesses. And in the shadows of those witnesses, Wraith found its next wave of recruits. The myth spread further than Ridge ever imagined. Entire species began incorporating Earth into their theology. The Order of Red Memory formed on Ilax, a religion that worshipped the Terran strike as a divine purification. They wore veils over their mouths to symbolize Earth's silence. They burned offerings, not of prayer, but of confessions. Documents, confessions, secrets, all set ablaze in giant Terran-shaped effigies. They didn't beg for Earth's mercy. They begged that Earth would see them as useful. Across the stars, loyalty to Earth became its own currency. But inside Terran Command, Ridge saw the price. He sat alone more often now. Talek had died in a deep-cover operation, not by enemy fire, by suicide, unable to live with the things he had done, the faces he couldn't forget. Wraith had grown too powerful, too autonomous. Even Ridge couldn't control it fully. Now, he had started a fire, and the fire was learning to walk without him. One night, a message came through Wraith's oldest secure channel. No codes, no identifiers, just a text. You made gods bleed. But what happens when they become you? Ridge stared at it for a long time, and for the first time in years, he felt something close to doubt. Had Earth won? Or had it become the thing it once feared? He didn't answer the message. But in the back of his mind, he began building a list, a new one, with Earth's own name at the top. The darkness no longer came from outside. It had rooted itself within. Ridge Halden stood at the edge of Earth's orbital station Nix 1, staring through the armored glass at the black canvas of space. Stars glittered, but they meant nothing now. To Ridge, each one was just another system waiting to remember Earth's pain, or be crushed by it. For years, he had justified everything: the burning of the High Capital, the executions, the silent erasures, the shrines built not by Terrans, but by those Earth had struck. All of it had felt righteous, an eye for a billion eyes, a reckoning. But now, he saw faces instead of facts, the children in burned labs, the scientists whose bodies were found clutching alien texts with Terran bullets in their heads, the growing line of defectors who whispered about Earth not as salvation, but as a new tyranny. Wraith had grown. Too fast. Too far. There were now over 4,000 field agents operating under the Shadow program. Most didn't even know each other's real names. They lived in identities patched together by Earth's bleeding-edge AI, reprogrammed down to muscle memory. They were still striking, still erasing, still eliminating names from ancient blacklists. But now the targets were murkier. No more syndicate bosses or slavers. Now Wraith targeted potential threats. Independent scientists, cultural historians, architects accused of designing non-Terran safe zones. One mission even terminated an interspecies diplomat who had argued for the creation of a neutral education system, simply because his theories questioned the ethics of fear-based peace. And every time Ridge read those reports, he saw his brother's face. Carson, killed because of political apathy, buried under a lie of diplomacy. But now, Ridge wasn't sure what Carson would think of what Earth had become. Earth was still unified under the Terran Accord, but beneath the surface, cracks spread like cancer. Civil unrest, silent protests, whispers of something Ridge thought impossible. Internal resistance. They called themselves the Pale Dawn. Small cells of Terrans, mostly young, who had grown up in the shadow of victory and began to ask, "What are we now?" They weren't pacifists. They respected what Earth had done. but they feared what Earth had become. They didn't fly banners or make speeches. They leaked. Footage of Terran black ops, logs of WRAITH interrogations, testimonies from deprogrammed agents who had been used and discarded once their psychological profiles decayed. Ridge read every leak, not to stop them, but because he needed to see the truth. One entry hit him hardest. Subject 191, Juno. Real name, Marin Thiel. Age at enlistment, 19. Parents killed during orbital strike by alien privateers. Volunteered for Wraith. Completed 23 missions. Final entry, I killed a child today. Target's son. Witness. Orders said no loose ends. I followed protocol. I felt nothing. I feel nothing. I am nothing. Status. Terminated after mental fracture during reintegration. Ridge stared at her face. Young, hollow, familiar, and he wept for the first time in years. He didn't tell anyone. Not Talek's replacement. Not the Accord's civilian council. Not even Wraith Command. But Ridge made a decision. He would dismantle Wraith from the inside. He would end what he started. Not with speeches, not with orders, but the same way Earth had taught the galaxy to remember. Through silence, through precision, through fire. He began with Nix-1. The orbital station was Wraith's newest uplink, home to a server cluster storing access routes to every field agent still active. Security was godlike. Biometric DNA hybrid locks, neural synapse recognition, quantum firewall with predictive blockers. Only Ridge had override access. Only Ridge could shut it down. The plan was simple. Breach the core, corrupt the database, wipe the names, cut the leashes. No more kill orders, no more operatives, just silence. But the moment Ridge entered the core sector, he knew something was wrong. The doors weren't locked. The security was already off. And inside, standing before the pulsing server column, was someone he thought dead. Talek. Or rather, someone wearing Talek's face. "Hello, Ridge," the figure said, voice calm, steady, just like he remembered. "You died," Ridge said quietly, eyes narrowing. Number I was reborn. "What the hell is this?" Talek's doppelganger turned, arms at his sides. "I saw what Wraith became. I saw the fear, and I realized Earth had finally become the galaxy's god." "You think that's a good thing?" "I think it's inevitable. You started it, Ridge. Now step back. Let it finish." Ridge stepped forward. "No." The fight wasn't cinematic. It was fast, brutal, efficient. Ridge didn't need fancy moves, just muscle memory, instinct, and decades of buried rage. He put Talek's clone down with 3 precise strikes. But even as the body collapsed, the core screen flared with red light. A countdown, security breach, lockout in progress. And Ridge understood. This wasn't just about him. Wraith had predicted this, prepared for it. Talek wasn't a person, he was a fail-safe. And Ridge had just triggered the last defense. He had 5 minutes. He uploaded a virus, code he'd written himself before Earth unified. Simple, elegant, devastating. It wouldn't erase Wraith, but it would release the truth. Mission logs, orders, videos, audio, everything, every lie, every execution, every decision that turned Earth from victim to judge to monster. The truth wouldn't redeem them, but it would free them. As the countdown hit 0, Ridge smiled once. Then the room went dark. The leak hit the galaxy like a second war. Billions of files, unfiltered, unedited, real. Entire civilizations paused. They saw not just Earth's wrath, but its rot. They saw agents breaking, children trained for death, civilian targets marked expendable for psychological reinforcement. Shrines were abandoned, worship turned to horror. The myth cracked, the fear remained. But so did something else. Doubt. The truth didn't set the galaxy free, it set it on fire. In the days following the leak, now simply called the Purge dossier, governments reeled, news networks collapsed under the weight of unscheduled broadcasts, military alliances severed ties, economies crashed. On every major world, holograms of Wraith killcams and logs from Earth's deepest vaults played in endless loops. Citizens who once feared Terran vengeance now saw the cost. And some began asking dangerous questions. What happens when the righteous become the tyrants? What happens when Earth isn't the threat, but the system itself? The Celestial Alignment convened an emergency summit, an attempt to reassert order over a galaxy reeling from guilt and fear. But it was a mistake. No one respected them anymore. The High Order had fallen once. The alignment had hidden behind Earth's shadow. Now their cowardice was fully exposed. By the end of the summit, half their members had defected. The rest were assassinated before the next dawn. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the Terran Accord began to fracture. Not immediately, but quietly, fatally. It started with the whistleblowers, the families of Wraith agents who'd gone missing years ago, now discovering the brutal truth behind their disappearances. Then came the survivors, ex-operatives Earth failed to terminate during shutdown. Their minds shattered, their bodies scarred. They came out of hiding and told their stories. Cities that once stood united under a single black banner now simmered with protest. They didn't want to betray Earth. They just wanted Earth to stop lying. General Arlen Trask took command in Ridge Halden's absence. He wasn't a war hero. He was a politician wearing a soldier's jacket. Clean, smooth-voiced, sharp-suited. He didn't cry when the Purge dossier dropped. He didn't apologize. He went live on global broadcast and said 6 words that rewrote Earth's fate forever. Ridge Halden died a traitor. There was silence, then rage, then chaos. Half of Wraith's remaining internal command refused to follow Trask's lead. They'd served Ridge, worshipped him, followed his fury, not his titles. They were the ghosts Ridge built, and now they turned on their makers. Within days, Earth's orbit was fractured by skirmishes between Black Ops vessels loyal to Trask and Shadow Wings still loyal to Halden's legacy. Civilians called it the fracture. It wasn't civil war, it was a reckoning. One voice rose above the others, not a general, not a leader, a girl, 17 years old, born in the ruins of Johannesburg, orphaned by orbital famine during the early years of Earth's consolidation, raised by a fringe faction of Pale Dawn defectors. Her name was Lyra Cade. Her words were broadcast across stolen frequencies. You taught us the galaxy would respect us if we made it bleed. You taught us survival meant dominance. But now you expect us to serve silence and call it peace? She paused. No dramatics, no polish. Earth wasn't feared because we were strong. We were feared because we were willing to die for the truth. So stop hiding behind ghosts. If we fall, let it be honest. It went viral, and unlike Trask's slogans, Lyra's voice couldn't be controlled. As Earth fractured, so did the galaxy's balance. Worlds that had sworn neutrality now turned predatory, sensing Earth's grip slipping. Forgotten syndicates re-emerged from the void. Bio-augmented cartels began trading ex-Wraith tech for control. Smugglers reverse-engineered abandoned Terran weapons and sold them to warlords across the system. Even Earth's own AI began to glitch. Too many algorithms built on Ridge's command structures were now corrupted. Code fragments of his values clashed with Trask's directives, resulting in paralysis and even sabotage. In one instance, an orbital cannon array meant to defend Earth's perimeter turned inward, targeting Terran cities as unverified hostiles. 6 cities died before the core was melted, by Earth's own hand. In the outer colonies, especially among the newer settlements on Mars and Ganymede, whispers of separatism turned loud. They didn't want war, but they no longer trusted Earth's vision. The Terran Accord no longer serves humanity. one Mars official said. It serves its own reflection. Meanwhile, scattered remnants of Wraith fled into the black. Some refused to surrender. Some couldn't. But others wanted something more. Not revenge. Rebirth. Among them was Commander Justin Rahl, once Ridge Halden's personal protege. He had vanished 2 years earlier during a Wraith blackout mission in the Velari sector, officially declared dead. Now, he reappeared with a fleet, not under Earth's banner, but a new one. 3 black stars over a burning chain. The Unshackled. His message was short. We were built in darkness, forged in vengeance, trained to erase the past, but we remember. We are what Earth denied, and we are not done. Some called them traitors, others called them heroes, but their names spread like wildfire. And in the silence beyond all of it, deep beneath the ruins of what was once the High Capital, another signal pulsed. Not from Earth, not from Wraith, but from something older, forgotten, watching. The signal was brief, encrypted, and in an ancient language Earth had dismissed as myth. 2 words. Their awakening. The signal came from the edge of the Dark Zone, a place cartographers had long stopped mapping. Sector Z Null. Beyond the Veil Nebula. Beyond reason. The message was short, almost ancient. Their awakening. At first, no one took it seriously. The galaxy had been drenched in Terran drama for too long. Between Wraith defections, unshackled insurgents, Trask's consolidation, and Lyra Cade's revolution spreading through the colonies, no one had time for ghosts. But the signal repeated, identical down to the last byte, broadcast on bands last used during the Orion collapse. And someone was listening. Not Trask, not the alignment, but what was left of Ridge Halden's silent network. The first to respond was an old scout frigate called the Vigilant, piloted by 4 veterans of the Terran War, all presumed dead after the Battle of Karen Drift. Men too tired to return, too loyal to truly defect. They had been orbiting dead systems, watching for exactly this kind of thing. Because Ridge had always said, the galaxy isn't empty, we were never alone, and someday, something worse than us will remember we're here. The Vigilant arrived at the edge of Z Null and never made it back. But it didn't vanish. It sent back one final ping, one final file, a video. It showed a planet, not natural, sculpted, hollow, made of black alloy not seen in any known element, orbiting nothing, dead in every conventional sense, but alive in ways no Terran physics could explain. Around it, debris. Thousands of derelict ships, not crashed, consumed, their cores drained, their hulls cracked as if something pulled them inward, molecule by molecule. And then came the figures. Not mechanical, not organic. Both. Tall, featureless. Their bodies flowed like metal exposed to heat. No faces, no eyes, just movement. And then the transmission cut. Back on Earth, General Trask watched the recovered video in silence. His staff looked to him for guidance. He gave none. Instead, he issued a silent directive. Classify, suppress, ignore. Earth was already at war with itself. No need to distract the public with cosmic horror. He failed to consider one thing. He wasn't in control anymore. Lyra Cade got the footage next, through back channels, through friends of Ridge who had never stopped believing in the real mission. Defense, not domination. She leaked it, not to cause panic, but to warn. The response was immediate. Every colony world paused. Even the Unshackled ceased their attacks. And in that moment, brief, raw, unfiltered, something happened that hadn't in decades. Earth listened. The news spread faster than light. The beings, dubbed the Revenants, were not new. Buried deep in ancient alien records, buried even deeper in human conspiracy theory, were echoes of them. Entities who watched the rise of civilizations and consumed them at their peak. Not invaders, correctors, like a universal reset. a reminder that no matter how far you climbed, the abyss was patient. The theory went like this. When any species reached a certain threshold, technological, social, or psychological, they would come. Not to conquer, but to erase, to balance the scales. The High Order had dismissed the legends. The celestial alignment buried the history. Earth had ignored it. But now, they were awake. Earth responded as it always did, with preparation. Across the broken infrastructure of the Terran Accord, bunkers reactivated. Shipyards lit up like ancient forges. AI cores recompiled old wartime protocols. Unshackled warfleets moved into position not against Earth, but beside it. Even Pale Dawn operatives agreed to ceasefire. Because Earth had become many things, feared, hated, envied, but it had also become the only thing ready to stand. The Revenants didn't negotiate. They didn't speak. They arrived. The first strike was on a neutral moon called Sarixa III, home to a peace monastery, a place untouched by war since the fall of the High Order. It vanished. No crater, no heat signature. Just gone, like it had been pulled into an unseen dimension. The second strike was worse. An unshackled convoy, 36 vessels, experienced, armed, each one consumed mid-fold. No survivors, just a new transmission. Balance will be restored. General Trask tried to mobilize the Accord under old doctrines, tried to reinstate control, but his command was hollow now. Earth's people didn't obey hierarchy anymore. They obeyed truth, and the truth came from one name, one ghost. Ridge Halden. Lyra Cade stood in the ruins of old Geneva, the symbolic birthplace of the Accord, when she made the call. Not to rally, but to confess. This was never supposed to happen. Ridge didn't want war. He wanted memory. He wanted to show the galaxy that pain deserved justice. But we made it our god. And now? Now something older is here. Something that doesn't care about guilt. Only balance. She paused. We have to fight, not for revenge, not for fear, but for the truth we lost along the way. She ended the transmission with a name. Project Revenant Protocol, Halden Doctrine. The doctrine was simple. Unite, strike first, use Terran tech, Wraith intel, and unshackled freedom in one strategy. Overwhelm. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't guaranteed, but it was the only plan with hope. The battle began at Zodnul. A coalition fleet, Earth's finest, rogue AI warships, human and alien hybrid units, Wraith remnants, Pale Dawn tacticians, even volunteers from Species Earth had once bombed into dust, because they all knew one thing. If Earth fell now, the galaxy fell with it. The Revenants were worse than anyone imagined. They adapted instantly, fed on energy, twisted ships into living husks. Every time one died, two emerged from its wreck. Earth's weapons barely slowed them, until one man stepped into the fire. Or rather, one ghost. Ridge Halden wasn't dead. His body had been pulled from the ruins of Nix 1 by rogue Wraith loyalists. He'd been broken. Blind in one eye, half his spine replaced with cold-frame steel. But he was alive. And when the Revenants turned the tide, he walked onto the bridge of the Dark Horizon, Earth's first dreadnought, now rusting in low orbit. He took command. No speeches, no cheers. Just one phrase. Let's remind them who we are. The final assault was chaos. Light and metal, eye and rage. The Dark Horizon drove into the heart of the artificial Revenant world with a warhead Ridge had built during Earth's darkest days, a quantum soul pulse bomb. It didn't destroy, it woke the planet. It showed it everything Ridge had seen, every death, every lie, every victory earned through blood and regret. And then, it stopped. The Revenants didn't die. They vanished. Not beaten, acknowledging. Balance had been shown, not through silence, but through sacrifice. Ridge died in the blast. For real, this time. No body recovered, no glory, just silence, and a galaxy left in his shadow. Years passed. Earth didn't rebuild the Accord. It didn't install new leaders. It built something smaller, simpler. A council of witnesses, one member from every world Earth had scarred. Their only job? Remember. Lyra Cade disappeared from the public eye. Some say she joined the witnesses. Others say she followed Ridge's path. But the sky no longer laughed at Earth, and Earth no longer sought applause. It simply watched and whispered one truth to the stars. Never again.